Hi, everyone. Welcome to a KE Report webinar. I'm your host, Corey Fleck, also your host over on our website, kereport.com, and podcast, The KE Report, where we cover market moves as well as a focus on the resource sector, featuring a number of interesting resource companies, which leads us into the feature of today's webinar with Exploits Discovery Corp. Now, Exploits is traded on the CSE under the symbol NFLD, the OTCQX under the symbol NFLDF, as well as the Frankfurt Exchange under the symbol 634. I am joined by a team here at Exploits, and as you can see, they are taking part in this webinar live from their core shack. So we do appreciate you guys giving us a little feeling of what it's like in that core shack behind you. I am joined by Jeff Swinoga, President and CEO of Exploits. You can also see Ken Tylee in the background there. He is the Vice President of Exploration. And also Shanda Kilborn, the Vice President of Investor Relations, will be joining us. Now, throughout this webinar, Exploits and the team is going to take us through the recently completed drill program at the Bullseye Project, as well as some of the other exploration plans for the company's land package in Newfoundland. Now, you will all be able to ask questions during this webinar. Please use the Q&A function within the webinar. And if you're listening to the recording of this, you can always email me directly, fleck@kereport.com, where I will be having Exploits and the team on to keep us updated on continued news and also address your questions. I will be interjecting a couple questions throughout this presentation, so please keep sending me your questions. I'll save them up as much as possible and also work them in as this presentation continues. So, Jeff, Ken, Shanda, thank you all for joining us. And Jeff, you're on the camera there. Please kick us off. Start off this presentation.
Well, great. I just want to say thanks, Corey, for having us. We hope this is going to be a very useful webinar for everyone. We're going to talk about our gold rush. We're going to talk about exploits in the future. So we do have a forward-looking slide here you can read at your leisure. And here are some of the speakers that you mentioned today and answering some questions. But I got to say, it's a beautiful day in Gander. You know, we just met with the mayor and the Chamber of Commerce, and I just doing it live from Gander. I think it's hopefully people get to share some of the excitement that we feel when we visit our guys and see the great work they're doing. But let me step back. So if you don't know, about 3.5 years ago, there was a gold rush that happened in Central Newfoundland, all around Gander. It started with a company called Newfound Gold. They had some amazing gold hits, became a $1 billion company, and we were very fortunate back then they're in blue here. You see them on the chart to the right, but we're able to pick up all this great property in yellow around Newfound Gold. So we've got a very strategic and one of the largest land packages in the province. We've got a great talented team right here in Gander. We've got a great board, great management team, well funded. Last time we reported we had $8 million in cash. And great founding shareholders in legendary investor Eric Sprott, and Newfound Gold himself owns 10% of us. So we're extremely happy to be part of this whole gold rush that's happening in beautiful Central Newfoundland. And just a bit about our capital structure. Right now our market cap's about 13 million. We got about 35 million shares outstanding, hardly any warrants. We got some options. And our shares are relatively liquid. We've got, actually last month we traded about 2 million shares in the US, and we traded about almost 3 million shares in Canada on the CSE. So good trading, good founding shareholders, really good capital structure. And if you don't know, again, this might be stepping too far back, but if you've ever seen the Lassonde curve in mining, basically it's like a value chart. So you're exploring here on the left-hand side. You're looking for whatever mineral, maybe it's gold in our example, and then this is where we see exports. We're kind of right here at the base, and as you have more discoveries, you kind of rise this up. You have a resource, you have a PEA, your feasibility study, you get into development. Of course, there's risks with development, and then you ride this curve back up again as you get into operations. So we see us right here, right at the cusp of hopefully creating a lot of value for our shareholders. And then also I put this chart together basically to illustrate, again, Newfound Gold, tremendous company, 10% shareholder, became a $1.1 billion company in Central Newfoundland, and on the back of great drilling results. I think they found 16 gold zones so far and counting, and every time they came out with a press release on good results, these blue bars represent the gain they had in their market cap. So you can see here's exploits with about 13 million in market cap, and Newfound Gold has gone anywhere up from about 34 million to almost 260 million on their journey to become this great exploration company, again, in Central Newfoundland. So we see a path forward for us, and we think we have all the key ingredients to become a great company like Newfound Gold. Just a bit about our team. I think you already talked about myself and Ken and Chanda, and beyond those great people, we've got Doug Cater. Doug Cater is one of our great board members who actually worked for Eric when he was at Kirkland Lake, the chief geologist, and he did the due diligence on with others on the Fosterville mine, one of the most profitable gold mines in the world, super high grade, and that just convinced Kirkland to actually acquire that property, and then ultimately they got acquired by Agnico Eagle, and Eric Sprott was the chair of that company. So great to have Doug and his insights and intellect on our property. Larry Short's a great local wealth advisor, series in sustainability, does a lot of great consulting for companies, and Rod's a geologist and also does great valuation work. But most importantly is the people on the ground here. All of our team is local, either from St. John's or Gander or from Gambo. Super proud of what they've accomplished so far. These are the people that make it happen for us. So you can see here's pictures of them doing all the great work on the ground, creating value for our shareholders. And also here's our local mascot, one of the guys' dogs right here. So, but let me turn it over to Ken, who's going to walk you through some of the geology here.
Hey there, and I got to tell you, some days that dog has more energy than most of us. So I'm going to try not to go on too much of a geology 101 sort of lecture here. I just want to give some background information for why Central Newfoundland is now the site of a major gold rush going on. So I'm hopeful that most people on this call have heard of plate tectonics. So just think of these rocks as, we've heard of continental drift, what's happening in Greenland and Iceland. So think of the rocks as being like a giant conveyor belt. So 500 million years ago, the sediments were getting built up off the coast of where Africa is today, repeating layers, almost like a layer cake of sands and gravels and muds. And eventually that conveyor belt started moving northwards, and those plates that were out under the ocean started heading northwards towards the stable North American continent. Eventually, they slammed up against the side of what we would call the eastern seaboard, heading up, let's say, through New York and into New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and now where Newfoundland is today. And these wedges, these slabs of rock slabbed up, almost like slabs or blades of a snow shovel against the solid continent. And these created lots of these parallel fault systems that these later stage mineralizing fluids could escape to surface. So we're trying to show the progression. And these rocks, as you can imagine, are very rigid and solid. They don't bend easily, and they only can take so much and snap, they break. They make these cracks, these fractures, and it's these fractures that the late stage fluids come in later and exploit. This is a very long-lived system. Sometimes they can be very deep. The studies in the Newfoundland area suggest that these fractures were forming 2 kilometers below the present surface, or the surface, sorry, at the time of deformation. So tightening up the scale, but you can see these are some of the sediments. As I said, these things started off life over off the coast of where Africa is now. They were flat-lying sandy beds and mud lenses and layers that were building up over hundreds of thousands of years. Then they started that continental drift northwards where they slammed up against the continent. Something had to give, so they started tilting and tilting and tilting. And as you can see there, they're oriented probably at about a 70-degree dip up against the stable continent. Tightening up the scale. Those images are about a meter on each side. It's amazing to me, at least, that something as hard as rock can actually deform almost like plasticine. So on the right-hand side, you can see the layers and the sediments that have like that Z-shaped fold. And on the left side, the rocks actually started rotating. They became plastic enough that they were able to shift and rotate. And that's what we're trying to show in that image in the center, where you have a lot of shearing and faulting moving along, and then the rocks start rotating and twisting. And all of those incompetencies create little voids and cracks, as I said earlier, that those late stage fluids can find and exploit. And that's what we're trying to show with those red streaks.
So that's where the gold comes in then, hey, Ken?
Hopefully, if those fluids coming up from down deep were fortunate enough to tap a reservoir that had source gold in it, okay? Usually they come to surface as a form of quartz, and that's what these images show here. These now, we're taking it down to the centimeter scale. It's as I said, for a geologist, it's amazing that rock can deform that much, and 500 million years ago. So as you can see on the left, what we call ductile deformation, they bent and bent and bent, and then they couldn't handle it anymore and snap. They cracked along these planes in here. Look at the amount, that incredible deformation in there. And there's some of the fluids coming in. So the deformation, you have times of opening, the fluids rush in, everything locks into place. Maybe a million years goes by, that conveyor belt moves a little bit more, maybe only a few centimeters, but everything starts deforming again. The system opens up, another shot of fluids come in, like let's say in here, and then boom, they solidify and lock up. It's a very long-lived, deep process. So there's my lecture for the day. So we're doing
our Geology 101, hey, Ken?
That's right, I'm sorry. So this is what the core looks like in comparison. And geologists are all about comparing throughout the world, seeing how our deposit looks compared to another successful deposit. Well, the one in the center is from the Fosterville mine over in Australia, that incredibly high-grade Swan Zone that was found quite deep below the main part of the ore body. And those red circles indicate areas that had visible gold. Well, there's some of the newfound core that they've published, pictures of them, and you can see very, very similarities in the texture. And again, you can see how there's almost like ribbony effects of all the different shots of quartz, the pulses of quartz that have come in year after year after year during the open lock sequence. There's some of the core, the picture I took just the other day from our first hole at Bullseye. It ran 14 grams, a lot of very similar textures to what you can see at Fosterville and Newfound Gold. These are classic textures for what we call orogenic gold deposits. So moving forward, Central Newfoundland, the exploit subzone, is very fortunate. You see those heavy dashed lines. That the red one is called the Appleton Fault Zone. It runs, we believe, for in the order of probably 100 kilometers, sort of on a north-south trend. There's lots of parallels next to you. You see the purple dash line, the brown dash line. These are parallel systems and splaying off there. We're trying to show in those black lines heading off at a sort of 45-degree angle from the breaks. Those are secondary structures. And then those are indicators that the ground, let's say, is fertile for gold enrichment, gold enhancement from those mineralizing fluids that I was talking about previously. So this is all structural preparations. It's important to remember that quartz veins can't just blast through solid rock. They need those conduits, they need those fractures and those gaps to exploit. So tightening up the focus here, we're really fortunate last September. The Newfoundland government was releasing some claims that had been disputed in the past, and they had sort of a winner-take-all staking rush. And we knew this was coming up, as a lot of our neighbors did, and we practiced and we practiced. We drank a lot of coffee, and on the morning of the staking rush, lo and behold, our fingers were faster on the mouse then very fortunately then our neighbors, and we were able to acquire what we call the Bullseye property. And as you can see with those white stars, it's right next to where Newfound has been having their great success, and to the north of us where Lab has been exploring at places like Big Vein and Golden Glove. So we're right in the middle of that. That's why we call the property Bullseye. So this, we believe, is a game changer for us. So the first thing we did once we got permitted to explore was we went in over the Christmas holidays and we hired some contractors, and they went in with some geophysical equipment that we call magnetics and VLF, which is an EM survey, very low frequency. And they went in, they essentially mapped out the features of the underlying bedrock, because in that area it's covered in about 10 to 20 meters of sands and gravels and swamps. These geophysical surveys are capable of seeing down into the bedrock, mapping out the bedrock surface, and again, mapping out those cracks and those fissures, those discontinuities in the underlying bedrock that hopefully gold mineralized fluids would exploit, through the various deformation processes. You see all those little dashed lines in these are secondary order, what we call splays, and they also could possibly indicate conduits for the fluids to exploit. And there, as you see, are some of our fantastic results that Newfound has been getting right next to our property position.
So are you looking for this pink or almost reddish color? Is that the target?
We're actually looking at a combo there, Corey. We're looking at the areas in the colder colors because they've been leached. We're thinking, our thoughts are that they've been leached of all the iron and the hot colors, the mineralization, the irons and chlorites, and these provide these colder colors, these magentas and blues and greens are indicating zones of weakness that hopefully the fluids would exploit. So the iron's been washed out, and hopefully the quartz and the mineralizing fluids have come in to replace it.
How much do you also use Newfound Gold's drill results to help target?
That, there's no doubt with having them next to us, Newfound is doing all the heavy lifting. They have up to 14 drills turning. We had one. So they're certainly, their progress is certainly helping, giving us additional guidance. They're helping us vector in at Bullseye. There, we were so fortunate. The very first hole of our program, we started back this winter time. We hit visible gold in a quartz vein in our very first hole. You can see the veins there. Again, as I was saying earlier, multi-stage happening over millions of years probably, and then reaching bigger pulses through here. And these are all sort of intruding into these highly deformed muds and slates. All this deformation occurred much, much later after those veins were formed. There's hole number 5. Again, you can see the vein systems very strongly developed, very multi-phase, or what we call multi-generation veining. The rocks around it have been deformed probably just much more recently and snapped and broken. Here's sort of an inset photograph here. Again, these are classic textures that you see in places like Timmins and Kirkland Lake and all the major producing areas in Canada. We really like seeing those textures and those features, and of course seeing the little green circles of visible gold. This particular sample between the two yellow arrowheads ran 12.5 grams over 3.5 meters from our sampling. So we were really, really excited about this.
So you're seeing what you want to see, right? But does that help for future targeting? Do you get any gauge of maybe where the higher grade or where the bigger widths in terms of that mineralization would be?
So what we're doing is we're putting together the perfect recipe. Okay, so these are a lot of key ingredients in that recipe, and so we're really happy to see that. Now what we want to start seeing is a confluence, or let's say an epicenter of veining building up, the way we're seeing at places a few kilometers to the south, like at Newfound's Keats discovery or their iceberg discovery. We want to start seeing bigger veins and more of them. We know we've officially confirmed by hole number 5 that we're in the correct hunting area. Now we just want to find where they're possibly concentrated. So Hole number 19 comes, look at that, 38.2 grams over 2.8 meters. Now the core is starting to have some legs, let's say. These photographs here are very similar to the great photographs that Newfound has in their press releases when they have big intercepts. And within this particular sample here ran almost 119 grams over 0.85 meters. So we're getting up into the really nice high grade range that we like to see. 55 individual grains of visible gold were counted. Okay, so we're looking at the core, we're looking at core angles, we're constantly rethinking our interpretation along the way. Where could the next vein be? Do we head to the left? Do we head to the right? Do we drill underneath? And it's like trying to put together a puzzle, Corey.
What about the depth component too? I noticed this drill hole 145 meters below surface. What are the depths like? How are you measuring those? How are you chasing those?
So we're drilling, our average hole is probably in the order of 350 meters depth. So using that inclination, probably these intercepts are anywhere from near surface down to, I would say right now at this stage, maybe minus 180 meters vertically below surface. I believe from what I read from the press releases with our neighbors, they're hitting veins anywhere from surface down to probably minus 300 meters right now. And their system and ours remains open to depth and open along strike. And that's a very important thing. I know where I live in the mines I've worked at in the past, they have very deep, what we call plunge lengths. The veins may track, individual veins may track, Corey, for 100, 150 meters. They may be up to 1 or 2 meters wide, but it's that plunge length. They often plunge down below surface, down 2 kilometers of depth, and that's how you can really build up good volumes of high-grade material.
Okay,
so this is a little video that we put together, and I'll see if I can get it running here. There's no audio for it.
So you get to talk us through it.
Yeah, so this is a plan map showing our zone and horseshoe zone that we've named in the middle of Bullseye. Those red slabs are the solids, the vein solids that our geologists Mark and Nick have sort of modeled and interpreted together. All those little discs, those hockey pucks, are sort of color coded. You see that chart off on the right? So the hot colors are high grade. So we're just trying to show how things are oriented and the early stage of exploration. This again is just sort of a wrap-up slide. As we are winding up our program, we've drilled 30 holes over 11,000 meters at Bullseye. The majority of that is in this horseshoe area that we just showed the video clip. We did sort of expand our thinking, I guess you could say, with the final few holes. We drilled hole 28 here, basically running parallel to our property boundary. And look at that, we got half a dozen sites in there with some really encouraging quartz veins up to that were generating values up to 14.5 grams. Then we moved the drill up to the north and we collared a hole over here, hole number 30, the final hole of the program. And we started drilling sort of in behind where the majority of our our horseshoe holes were drilled. And boom, we hit a nice spot of visible gold in there that ran 46 grams. So this has opened our eyes that there's additional opportunities for mineralization within that 1.5 kilometer track of the Appleton on our Bullseye claims. So we're really looking forward to going back hopefully later this year and setting up our drill. I certainly want to get in there and follow up on hole 28, see what's further over here. We don't know. Maybe the great results that Newfound has been getting on Everest, maybe they strike eastwards onto our property. These values kind of suggest they may do that, but we just have to see and find out if that indeed is the case. So yes, we're quite looking forward to getting back onto site.
Now, Ken, just one more quick question here. I've covered a number of stories in Newfoundland and around this Appleton Fault. I noticed a lot of your drill results are to the east of Appleton Fault. What about to the west? Or have you drilled much over there? Are you just not seeing the indications of more potential gold? Can you give us an understanding of why so much focus on the eastern side?
Just on the eastern side, because as I showed earlier, that's where the geophysical interpretations, the regional interpretations, and the structural studies that have been done over the past 20 years tend to show those splays peeling off on the east side. So we started off our initial program focusing on the east side of the break. But I can tell you, Newfound has been testing on the west side, and as you probably, if you go back to their press releases, they're getting quite a bit of success on both the K2 and the Keats West systems that are on the west side of the break. To the north of us, Roger Moss and Lab, their big vein is entirely located on the west side of the break. We have not devoted like in an individual hole yet, Corey, to testing purely on the west side. Some of our holes have drilled through the fault zone. That's our marker. We look for that rubble zone to make sure we know where we are in the succession of rocks. But we have not specifically tested the west side of the break. That'll definitely be something that we'll be doing in the future, possibly our phase number 3. But yes, it's wide open for exploration is here as well.
Do you have any insights on where Newfound is drilling right now compared to where the border is? I have a lot of people asking that question.
I can tell you, just every day that we drive out there, we can see the water lines running through the bush. We can hear the drill rigs turning. I believe they have 2 or 3 rigs sort of in this Everest and Jackpot area. I know the majority of them seem to be down where they're trying to outline, or what we call delineate, at the Keats zone, which would probably be about 3 kilometers to the south. I'll get to I have a slide coming up, Corey, that'll sort of show that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, while we were sort of wrapping up our drilling back in May and the snow was starting to melt, we started sending our prospectors out into the bush at Bullseye and starting to go through the bush and prospect. Our team we have, they're all local prospectors. They grew up in this area hunting and fishing. They know the area really, really well. All these red little squiggly lines are their GPS tracks of they're walking through the bush on a daily basis. All the little white dots indicate where they've been able to sample quartz, either boulders of quartz popping up through the soil or outcrops like this picture here, exposures of sort of the underlying rock poking up through surface. These are all really great indications of, again, the fertility of the system, because this is where the Appleton Fault Zone tracks right through here. And yet we're getting quartz indicators up to 700-800 meters away from the main conduit, let's say. We're waiting for the results to come back from the lab as we speak. And I'm sure a lot of people have heard, or if they're following the Newfound story, they're just wrapping up the field work for a very extensive sort of first time, at least for this part of Canada, seismic survey. This is a very deep looking, deep seeing survey that is really new for gold exploration, and they're giving it a shot. And we sort of gave them permission to run their lines across, you can see these here, run their lines across our Bullseye property. They're trying to build up a 3-dimensional sort of architectural map of the system, the setting, and everybody is going to watch this very, very closely. As I said earlier, the majority of their drilling is not expanded down beyond 300 meters below surface. Let's say on this conceptual map, just in this area here. This survey they're running apparently sees down 2 kilometers. So this is going to be really, really interesting for everybody involved to see what's possibly buried down below. Are all these individual zones that are almost like smokestacks? Hopefully these things all come together. They all sort of coalesce at depth. That would be fantastic news for Newfound, but it would also be for Bullseye and actually for this entire system, right? To have that sort of epicenter going on at depth.
And I'd just say that in Australia, this was successfully used, and they call it like the fingers of God sort of coming up, as Ken mentioned, these orogenic flows to find these major gold deposits. So yeah, we're really excited to get the data from seismic. I know a few people have asked when we're going to get the data, probably in October.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to really help us out to understand what we have at Bullseye, and hopefully to the north with Gazebo. Sorry,
Yeah.
Ken.
So I would just say,
do you think you guys will be waiting for that information before you start up another drill program, even before you plan another one?
don't know. It will certainly augment our opinions on where to drill right now. But again, this is going to be hopefully very, very deep information. It's going to be a confidence builder. In my opinion, just my opinion, it has the implications that could build up a camp scale model, okay? And that would be crucial for this entire exploration play. This could really put Central Newfoundland on the map sort of internationally if Newfound is successful in joining up all these fingers, as Jeff said, at depth, okay? So we're still going to be drilling very shallow in this area here, but it's going to certainly tell us what's down below, about the long-term possibilities at depth and how everything is pieced together, where the source, where that reservoir of possible ore fluids are.
Do you know how deep Newfound has drilled their deepest hole?
I can't specifically say, but I believe it's in the order, I believe they're looking down vertically now, possibly between 350 to 400 meters below surface for their intercepts. But Corey, I suggest go into, they've got a fantastic website. They have lots of info there. I'm sure you can pull out that information.
Absolutely.
And this is just another slide trying to show the area that is covered by the seismic survey. Look at all those holes in there. We believe that Newfound is drilled in the order of 1,700 holes since their discovery. You can see a lot of their setups in there marching right up towards our claim boundary. There in this area, and here is where we drilled our horseshoe holes, are basically the majority of our 30 holes. That hole 28 that I was talking about sort of runs along the property boundary in here. But look at these lines through the bush here. These are sort of 3 and 4 foot wide lines that were mulched out so that Newfound seismic contractors could walk through the area and place their geophones and collect all that lattice or that grid system of acoustic information coming back from their survey. So there's going to be really fantastic coverage when the results do come out.
And one thing just to mention on this slide is that people ask us how close are they drilling. And I'm not sure if you look at the bottom there, this is from Google Earth, June 28th, like literally just about 2 months ago. And you see the scale is from 1 to 500 to 1,000 meters there. So you can actually see visually, and we can go on Google Earth and see this, but you can see they're right on our boundaries here.
Yeah, for the Everson, for the jackpot discoveries. And as they're drilling for another additional, probably 4 kilometers southwards towards the Trans-Canada Highway. So we're really excited. And as we know, Lab Gold is drilling to the north of us. So this is what you're seeing in this image here, Corey, is probably represents 2.5 or a 3 kilometer segment of as I said earlier, possibly a 60 kilometer trend, right? There is really the long-term possibilities this could work out if successful, and if we can carry this mineralization up past Lab Gold and further to the north, that this could really generate a camp scale, long-lived sort of exploration belt. It really
also answers a number of questions that I've had asking just how close to the border are they drilling? This Google Earth shows us perfectly.
There's your answer right there in Google, in Google Earth.
Yeah, sorry, right there.
And we shut down our drill in late May because we didn't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. We wanted to remain cost effective. We wanted to check out one of our properties called Gazebo, about 20 kilometers to the north of where the drill was. You can see in green here, this is the position that Lab Gold has, and Newfound, our neighbors up there as well. So we have our prospecting crews out going through this area right now. We're doing till samples, we're doing recon work where the prospectors are walking through the area, again, looking for quartz exposures. We need to find out, is this indeed the epicenter of gold mineralization, or is something going on to the north? We don't know. There's been very little work up here, very little drilling to indicate where in the system we want to be.
And one thing, if I could mention, just going back to reiterate the point that over a 5 kilometer stretch just to the south there, Ken, that's how they've created their $1 billion of value. And we hope they find more and get even bigger and better, of course. But if you look at the property size that we have at Bullseye, 1.2 kilometers, and then you look at the size of Gazebo, it's a very, very large claim. to the north. So we hope there's going to be multiple gold discoveries along Gazebo. But we have to do the work, and that's the work we're doing.
Right. Do you know if Lab Gold has done any work up north there, closer to this Gazebo project?
I could not say for sure. I know that most recently they had some press releases, good looking numbers from their drop kick area in here. That's about halfway up, probably in the order of still 4 kilometers from our property boundary in here, right? Okay. We're collecting soil samples. We call them tills. We're looking for flakes of gold that hopefully have been lifted off the quartz veins that are buried under all that till and sand. They've been lifted off by glacial action, and they're sort of floating, let's say, hovering, hopefully, over top of the source, over the quartz vein source. So we're sending our prospectors and some contractors out into that area, and they're collecting over 150 till samples, digging these pits and collecting these big bags of the sandy soil that sits directly on top of the outcrop. And we're sending them off to a consultant up in Ottawa called ODM, and their scientists are looking through these bags. They're filtering them and sieving them, looking for individual gold grains that could have been lifted off the underlying bedrock. And this will help give us additional vectors where we could possibly bring a drill in probably in 2024 by the time we get the results back. So again, these are good indicator tools to use to help us build up our knowledge, build up our confidence of where we want to spend our drilling budget moving forward. All the time, all the meanwhile, we'll be continuing to drill down here at Horseshoe.
Have we gotten many of these sample results released in the market yet?
No, we're still in the process. We're just wrapping up the collection of these, Corey. We've sent, I believe, 3 shipments off to ODM so far, and we probably have another 3 shipments to go. Okay, so I would anticipate it's a very laborious, very detailed process that they run through. I would suspect we're not going to have the results back until probably the 4th quarter.
Okay, and again, there's been no historic work done up here. This is early stage exploration.
This is very early stage. I mean, the prospectors, you know, the Keats and the Stairs, the Stockleys, the Quinlans, they've been combing through this area for 50 years and picking up little indications during their sort of weekend prospecting trips. But we have nothing really, let's say, statistical or scientific from the modern terms.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And so this is just sort of the wrap up here. I'm sure Jeff can maybe step in if he wants to, and just this is our sort of our view of what exploits will be up to going forward over the next 6 months. So I'll let Jeff sort of take over, considering Jeff will be paying the bills.
Yeah. well, just topping this off, you know. But yeah, again, I hope people see what we see. We've got numerous opportunities here, like the expansion of Horseshoe, as Ken mentioned. We certainly go back there. Bullseye South looks really good. I mean, from a number of different, whether it's the quartz refining on the ground, whether it's the possible extensions that we're seeing from our neighbors, the seismic survey, as you mentioned, Corey, how the information is going to come out, when it's going to come out, what's it going to show us. But we're not certainly going to wait for that. And then also, as you mentioned too, the west side of Horseshoe is untouched on Bullseye. So it's a whole new area. Could it be another K2 that Newfoundland Gold just came out with recently? So really interesting stuff. And we're not done at Bullseye, you know. So that's the key message. There's a lot more to see. And actually, Gazebo looks really good just to the size and where it's located. So, but we're doing the work. The LiDAR survey should be coming out hopefully soon. And then also we're going to talk about our drill targets on Gazebo, maybe it's end of this year or early next year. But yeah, so stay tuned. It's going to be an exciting sort of fall season for us, and then into the early winter. So that's it for us. I mean, hopefully you stay tuned all this way through. I think hopefully people understand and why we're excited. And it's just a great region to be in, great neighbors. And you know, we're just looking forward to creating great shareholder value for everyone.
Yeah, it seems like just one big drill hole away, right? That's how Newfound started, and then they just kept following it and making new discoveries too. Ken, there's a few questions that have come in regarding these different faults too, because look, so much focus is on this Appleton Fault. But on some of those prior maps, you also outlined the JBP fault, the Reach fault, the Schooner fault. Is there any work going on around these faults that who knows, could turn out to be something like an Appleton Fault target-wise?
There certainly has been work that's gone on in the past by previous claim holders. That information has all been filed with the Newfoundland government. It's available to the public to go and look at. Our geologists have, and they've sort of compiled a lot of it into, let's say, a prospectivity map. Again, looking at what areas have the ideal, let's say, recipe. You can see some of these red stars here on the Dog Bay Fault. There's showings at Deuter Lake and Clutha. We did some drilling in late 22 at the Titan prospect. This is one of the splays coming off of Dog Bay. There's lots of areas to go prospecting, but right now Exploits is trying to focus on Appleton. Okay, we're very fortunate we have such a large property position, but to be honest, it's also a bit of an impediment because we can't be everywhere at once, right? We are trying to focus our efforts right now on the hot zone, the newsworthy zone, which is Appleton. But we are certainly going to be getting back, maybe this time next year, we'll be able to say that we've spent a lot of time prospecting along the Dog Bay up in here. Or over in this. I know the guys are really keen. See this structure here that's called the Mount Payton Linear? See, it's sort of offset from the others. And there's been some historical showings in there, and the guys are really, really itching to get out to that area.
Okay, this is another good map to handle another question where a couple people have said, look, this Bullseye property, it's generally small. We can see in this whole land area, it's right in between, I would say, where you want to be with Newfound Gold and Labrador Gold, but the other projects, Gazebo, all these other yellow blobs, they're much bigger, right? So what would the corporate strategy be here? Bullseye, is it simply to show that mineralization extends onto your property and it's an obvious takeout target for Newfound Gold so that you could then go explore the other areas? Is that what you're thinking corporate-wise?
Jeff, I don't know if you want to answer.
Yeah, so Bullseye, we see so much near-term benefit for our shareholders at Bullseye. Like literally, again, we call it Bullseye because it's right there in the action. So as you said, one drill hole could be a game changer for all of us at the company. So, and we see that at Bullseye. It's just ready to go. And people ask, when we first got the claim, as Ken mentioned, everyone in Gander who was doing high fives, first question was, when can you drill it? Right? So we had our first phase, had our first gold discovery, Horseshoe. Hopefully our second phase, we're going to have one or two more gold discoveries. But that's our focus right now. But we're not ignoring Gazebo. We've been blitzing Gazebo this summer. Yeah. And so much like our neighbor Newfound Gold blitzing their property. So we're hoping to get Gazebo in a position where we're going to have identify a lot of new drill targets for the new year. So yeah, it's a multi-phased overall game plan that we've put together to add the most value for our shareholders near term, medium term, and also long term. If you look at our property position, everything seems to be going north. Yeah. And we've got the land to the north. Yeah, we're sort of going from known to unknown. As I said, we're so fortunate that our neighbors are doing a lot of the heavy lifting here in the south. And now we've been successful to carry on that projection through Bullseye. We know that the Lab Gold guys are having a lot of success along the northern track, and now it's possibly extending onto our Gazebo. We're looking at probably in the order of 20 kilometers of strike length in that area that we have exposure to. So that's, as Jeff said, that's where our crews are up. They're working there right today. They'll be back in still a couple hours from now, coming in with their rock samples that they've collected during the day. And then we'll continue working our way forward northwards, right? And
what
then
is access like up north then? Because you're right, there hasn't been a ton of exploration up north. Is it harder to access? Is there less infrastructure up there?
Certainly less infrastructure, but there's a lot of old sort of unmaintained forestry roads. They did a lot of cutting in the 60s and 70s of the lumber up in here, so there's still quite usable roads. Now, none of them are sort of serviced or snow plowed, so we are sort of seasonal in our accessibility. But yeah, we are capable of getting in there with quads or ATVs and side-by-sides and sort of getting away from the main sort of access roads, right?
And Corey, like all of our properties are basically accessible within probably about an hour. Right. Yeah, okay. And Bullseye is actually, just going back to that, I mean, if we were having coffee right now and it's too hot, it'd still be too hot and you'd burn your tongue by the time we got to Bullseye. It's only like 20 minutes away.
Yeah.
So great access, and we're really well positioned location-wise.
Yeah.
Okay. A couple questions. Newfound Gold and Eric Sprott. When did they come into the company for their position?
Yeah, so Eric, going back about 3 years, we were de facto going to be the next Newfound Gold due to our land position. So Eric invested in at that point. And the Newfound also got their position through a property trade. So they've been holding, as far as we see it, 10%. They're a great neighbor, super supportive. We're super supportive of them as well. And and Eric just gave us some further investment when we raised money back in December.
Yeah.
Okay.
Corey, their office is 400 meters from where we're sitting, just down the street.
Yeah, Newfound Gold's office.
Yes.
Right there.
Yeah.
So is there any assistance or synergy between you and Newfound Gold?
Yeah, a lot of our guys were all classmates together. They know each other. They sort of get together occasionally, like on a social level. I want to say we're collegial, right? We share roads, those forest access roads. We share them. We maintain them. We make sure that we have safe access, and we're always aware of impediments and safety hazards. I would hope to say we have sort of an open door policy as far as, especially for things like safety.
Okay. Now, Jeff, in terms of cash position of the company, you already addressed that early on in this presentation. What's going to be the strategy? How do you go about continuing to explore, but also understanding that, look, the financing market still has been tough for a wide range of resource companies? How are you going to go about balancing not spending all the cash at once, but still progressing forward?
Yeah, no, great question, Corey. If anyone has any questions, please ask us, because we're full transparency for what we're doing. And so from a cash position, as you mentioned, we're going to run that balance. So I have to say we are truly fortunate, because back 3.5 years ago, when Newfound Gold had their big discovery, they didn't have sort of a Newfound Gold that had 3 years of history along the Appleton Fault. We had sort of seen success. We've seen these splays. We've seen the geology. So when we started drilling, just like when we found Horseshoe, putting 30 holes in, probably a very small program, but, very targeted program. So not really a systematic approach. So what we think we can do is, with a small number of drill holes, hopefully have a magnitude or significant benefit to our shareholders being demonstrated through finding gold mineralization. So we don't need to drill as many holes as if we didn't have a big neighbor like Newfound Gold, if that makes sense. So that balance you talked about, we're actually well positioned that way, because with our cash balance, we monitor that very closely. We're very cost effective, and also cost effective in our drilling, frugal but yet impactful, and that's what we plan to be going forward as well.
Okay. Ken, another question that came in was, how do you go about prioritizing and ranking these exploration areas? As we see here, there's a lot of red stars. You've put a lot of focus recently on Bullseye. It sounds like Gazebo South, that's also being the focus. But what stands out to you? What would rise one of these red stars here to a must drill now?
I would say if the guys come back at the end of the day and reporting that they're seeing visible gold in some samples that they've collected, that's always a huge indicator for us. We would go in then and blitz that area, collect another 50 or 60 samples, try and work out a systematic sort of gridded exposure to see how big that quartz vein could possibly be. And essentially, we're building up report cards, just like kids at school. We're building up report cards, or as I said, the ideal recipe. Does it have all the right ingredients? And if it has 60 or 70% of the needed ingredients, that's good by me, and we'll put it on our priority list for drilling. And each of the showings, each of these areas that the guys come back to us are going to have to be gauged or compared to the next one and to the previous one. And then at the end of the day, hopefully we'll have a tough decision. We'll all sit around and we'll decide, okay, This is where we can get the most bang for our buck. This is where we think we have our biggest opportunity to score and to drill with success. And we constantly have a evolving or a dynamic prioritization going on. The geologists constantly do this every single day. They look at the quartz veins in the drill core and they compare it to what they saw the day before or what they saw further up hole. Well, the same thing goes on for our prospectors out in the bush. They're constantly comparing, oh, this reminds me of the stuff I saw a few years ago when I was prospecting with my dad. So they're constantly ranking and rating themselves. So we just keep trying to accumulate all that information and come up with the most cost-effective opportunity, let's say, to find something.
Okay.
And as you see, and I know there's been questions about these parallel systems, Dog Bay and like I said, the Mount Peyton Linear and some of these other ones in here, the JPP and Grub Line, all those ones, you know, they just, honestly, they have not received the same amount of focus as the Appleton has since 2018. I would love to tell you 10 years from now that we'd have big giant dashed lines along these breaks as well, because we'll have had the benefit of the time and budgets to go in there and thoroughly explore. It really scares me, Corey, that there's huge gaps in here that have not had a single drill hole for 20 or 30 kilometers. We don't really know, other than, you know, having to rely on some old historic records and just really sniffs and indicators. We don't know. There may be an equal opportunity, let's say, along some of these other areas. It really requires patience and diligence and, let's say, sustained enthusiasms.
Takes the work, and you guys are doing the work. So something that I'll continue to follow along with. But Jeff, before I get you guys out of here, and I do appreciate you handling these questions, taking us through the exploration strategy. We are recording this late in August 2023. What's some of the news flow that investors should look forward to coming out of exploits for, let's say, at least the remainder of this year?
Yeah, great point, Corey. Just to top off here, you know, we go back to our catalyst. You know, we're looking forward to going back to Bullseye, do some drilling, targeted, focused. More information is coming out from around the area with our neighbors on seismic, so look forward to that. We'll be looking for extensions as Horseshoe get bigger. The west side, as Ken mentioned, maybe later on in phase 3. We'll have LiDAR information out. So we're going to have a lot more information coming out in this area. And also, just stay tuned to some announcements. I mean, drilling at Bullseye again is going to be exciting, I think, because we've got a lot more information than we first started back in February of this year. You know, Everest wasn't discovered. Jackpot wasn't discovered. So we came out with Horseshoe right around the same time that Newfound came out with their discovery. So there's a lot more information that's coming out now. It's going to be focused on this area. And so as things tighten up and as we get more precise, we're hopeful to have more impactful drilling going forward.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you, Ken. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Again, if you have any follow-up questions, please email me. There's Shanda. There's the rest of the team. Look, see? It's happening. It's at their core shack. Very fun to see the background here. I enjoy it much more than that office environment. So thank you all for taking time to share this presentation. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And please email me with any follow-up questions you have. And be sure to check our website for updates coming from Exploits. And also check out the Exploits website of exploitsdiscovery.com. So everybody, again, thank you very much for tuning in to this webinar.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.